A Monument of French Folly. By Charles Dickens. It was profoundly observed by a witty member of the Court of Common Council, in council assembled in the city of London, in the year of our Lord 1850, that the French are a frog-eating people, who wear wooden shoes. We are credibly informed, in reference to the nation whom this choice spirit so happily disposed of, that the caricatures and stage representations which were current in England some half a century ago, exactly depict their present condition. For example, we understand that every Frenchman, without exception, wears a pigtail and curl papers. That he is extremely sallow, thin, long-faced, and lantern-jawed. That the calves of his legs are invariably undeveloped, that his legs fail at the knees, and that his shoulders are always higher than his ears. We are likewise assured that he rarely tastes any food but soup maigre, and an onion, that he always says, by gar. Aha! That you tell me, sir, at the end of every sentence he utters, and that the true generic name of his race is the Mounseers, or the Parlez-vous. If he be not a dancing master, or a barber, he must be a cook, since no other trades but those three are congenial to the tastes of the people, or permitted by the institutions of the country. He is a slave, of course. The ladies of France, who are also slaves, invariably have their heads tied up in belcher handkerchiefs, wear long earrings, carry tambourines, and beguile the weariness of their yoke by singing in head voices through their noses, principally to barrel organs. It may be generally summed up, of this inferior people, that they have no idea of anything. Of a great institution like Smithfield, they are unable to form the least conception. A beast market in the heart of Paris would be regarded an impossible nuisance. Nor have they any notion of slaughterhouses in the midst of a city. One of these benighted frog-eaters would scarcely understand your meaning, if you told him of the existence of such a British bulwark. It is agreeable, and perhaps pardonable, to indulge in a little self-complacency when our right to it is thoroughly established. At the present time, to be rendered memorable by a final attack on that good old market which is the rotten apple of the corporation's eye, let us compare ourselves, to our national delight and pride as to these two subjects of slaughterhouse and beast market, with the outlandish foreigner. The blessings of Smithfield are too well understood to need recapitulation. All who run away from mad bulls and pursuing oxen may read. Any market day they may be beheld in glorious action. Possibly the merits of our slaughterhouses are not yet quite so generally appreciated. Slaughterhouses, in the large towns of England, are always, with the exception of one or two enterprising towns, most numerous in the most densely crowded places, where there is the least circulation of air. They are often underground, in cellars, they are sometimes in close backyards, sometimes, as in Spitalfields, in the very shops where the meat is sold. Occasionally, under good private management, they are ventilated and clean. For the most part, they are unventilated and dirty, and, to the reeking walls, putrid fat and other offensive animal matter clings with a tenacious hold. The busiest slaughterhouses in London are in the neighbourhood of Smithfield, in Newgate Market, in Whitechapel, in Newport Market, in Leadenhall Market, in Clare Market. All these places are surrounded by houses of a poor description, swarming with inhabitants. Some of them are close to the worst burial grounds in London. When the slaughterhouse is below the ground, it is a common practice to throw the sheep down areas, neck and crop, which is exciting, but not at all cruel. When it is on the level surface, it is often extremely difficult of approach. Then, the beasts have to be worried, and goaded, and pronged, and tail twisted, for a long time before they can be got in, which is entirely owing to their natural obstinacy. When it is not difficult of approach, but is in a foul condition, what they see and scent makes them still more reluctant to enter, which is their natural obstinacy again. When they do get in at last, after no trouble and suffering to speak of, for, there is nothing in the previous journey into the heart of London, the night's endurance in Smithfield, the struggle out again, among the crowded multitude, the coaches, carts, wagons, omnibuses, gigs, chaises, phaetons, cabs, trucks, dogs, boys, whoopings, roarings, and 10,000 other distractions. They are represented to be in a most unfit state to be killed, according to microscopic examinations made of their fevered blood by one of the most distinguished physiologists in the world, Professor Owen, but that's humbug. When they are killed, at last, their reeking carcasses are hung in impure air, to become, as the same professor will explain to you, less nutritious and more unwholesome, but he is only an uncommon counselor, so don't mind him. In half a quarter of a mile's length of Whitechapel, at one time, there shall be 600 newly slaughtered oxen hanging up, and 700 sheep, but, the more the merrier, proof of prosperity. Hard by Snow Hill and Warwick Lane, you shall see the little children, inured to sights of brutality from their birth, trotting along the alleys, mingled with troops of horribly busy pigs, up to their ankles in blood, but it makes the young rascals hardy. Into the imperfect sewers of this overgrown city, you shall have the immense mass of corruption, engendered by these practices, lazily thrown out of sight, to rise, in poisonous gases, into your house at night, when your sleeping children will most readily absorb them, and to find its languid way, at last, into the river that you drink. But, the French are a frog-eating people who wear wooden shoes. And it's oh the roast beef of England, my boy, the jolly old English roast beef. It is quite a mistake, a newfangled notion altogether, to suppose that there is any natural antagonism between putrefaction and health. They know better than that, in the Common Council. You may talk about nature, in her wisdom, always warning man through his sense of smell, when he draws near to something dangerous, but, that won't go down in the city. Nature very often don't mean anything. Mrs. Quickly says that prunes are ill for a green wound, but whosoever says that putrid animal substances are ill for a green wound, or for robust vigor, or for anything or for anybody, is a humanity-monger and a humbug. Britons never, 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 and see, therefore. And prosperity to cattle driving, cattle slaughtering, bone crushing, blood boiling, trotter scraping, tripe dressing, paunch cleaning, gut spinning, hide preparing, tallow melting, and other salubrious proceedings, in the midst of hospitals, churchyards, workhouses, schools, infirmaries, refuges, dwellings, provision shops, nurseries, sick beds, every stage and baiting place in the journey from birth to death. These uncommon counselors, your Professor Owens and fellows, will contend that to tolerate these things in a civilized city, is to reduce it to a worse condition than Bruce found to prevail in Abyssinia. For there, say they, the jackals and wild dogs came at night to devour the offal, whereas, here there are no such natural scavengers, and quite as savage customs. Further, they will demonstrate that nothing in nature is intended to be wasted, and that besides the waste which such abuses occasion in the articles of health and life, main sources of the riches of any community, they lead to a prodigious waste of changing matters, which might, with proper preparation, and under scientific direction, be safely applied to the increase of the fertility of the land. Thus, they argue, does nature ever avenge infractions of her beneficent laws, and so surely as man is determined to warp any of her blessings into curses, shall they become curses, and shall he suffer heavily. But, this is cant. Just as it is cant of the worst description to say to the London Corporation, how can you exhibit to the people so plain a spectacle of dishonest equivocation, as to claim the right of holding a market in the midst of the great city, for one of your vested privileges, when you know that when your last market-holding charter was granted to you by King Charles I, Smithfield stood in the suburbs of London, and is in that very charter so described in those 5 words. Which is certainly true, but has nothing to do with the question. Now to the comparison, in these particulars of civilization, between the capital of England, and the capital of that frog-eating and wooden shoe-wearing country, which the illustrious Common Councilman so sarcastically settled. In Paris, there is no cattle market. Cows and calves are sold within the city, but the cattle markets are at Poissy, about 13 miles off, on a line of railway, and at Sceaux, about 5 miles off. The Poissy market is held every Thursday, the Sceaux market, every Monday. In Paris, there are no slaughterhouses, in our acceptation of the term. There are 5 public abattoirs, within the walls, though in the suburbs, and in these all the slaughtering for the city must be performed. They are managed by a syndicate or guild of butchers, who confer with the Minister of the Interior on all matters affecting the trade, and who are consulted when any new regulations are contemplated for its government. They are, likewise, under the vigilant superintendence of the police. Every butcher must be licensed, which proves him at once to be a slave, for we don't license butchers in England, we only license apothecaries, attorneys, postmasters, publicans, hawkers, retailers of tobacco, snuff, pepper, and vinegar, and 1 or 2 other little trades, not worth mentioning. Every arrangement in connection with the slaughtering and sale of meat is matter of strict police regulation. Slavery again, though we certainly have a general sort of police act here. But, in order that the reader may understand what a monument of folly these frog-eaters have raised in their abattoirs and cattle markets, and may compare it with what common counseling has done for us all these years, and would still do but for the innovating spirit of the times, here follows a short account of a recent visit to these places. It was as sharp a February morning as you would desire to feel at your fingers' ends when I turned out, tumbling over a chiffonier with his little basket and rake, who was picking up the bits of colored paper that had been swept out, overnight, from a bonbon shop, to take the butcher's train to Poissy. A cold, dim light just touched the high roofs of the Tuileries which have seen such changes, such distracted crowds, such riot and bloodshed, and they looked as calm, and as old, all covered with white frost, as the very pyramids. There was not light enough, yet, to strike upon the towers of Notre Dame across the water, but I thought of the dark pavement of the old cathedral as just beginning to be streaked with grey, and of the lamps in the house of God, the hospital close to it, burning low and being quenched, and of the keeper of the morgue going about with a fading lantern, busy in the arrangement of his terrible waxwork for another sunny day. The sun was up, and shining merrily when the butchers and I, announcing our departure with an engine shriek to sleepy Paris, rattled away for the cattle market. Across the country, over the Seine, among a forest of scrubby trees, the hoarfrost lying cold in shady places, and glittering in the light, and here we are, at Poissy. Out leap the butchers, who have been chattering all the way like madmen, and off they straggle for the cattle market, still chattering, of course, incessantly, in hats and caps of all shapes, in coats and blouses, in calf-skins, cow-skins, horse-skins, furs, shaggy mantles, hairy coats, sacking, baize, oilskin, anything you please that will keep a man and a butcher warm, upon a frosty morning. Many a French town have I seen, between this spot of ground and Strasbourg or Marseilles, that might sit for your picture, little Poissy. Barring the details of your old church, I know you well, albeit we make acquaintance, now, for the first time. I know your narrow, straggling, winding streets, with a kennel in the midst, and lamps slung across. I know your picturesque street corners, winding uphill heaven knows why or where. I know your tradesmen's inscriptions, in letters not quite fat enough, your barbers' brazen basins dangling over little shops, your cafés and estaminets, with cloudy bottles of stale syrup in the windows, and pictures of crossed billiard cues outside. I know this identical grey horse with his tail rolled up in a knot like the back hair of an untidy woman, who won't be shod, and who makes himself heraldic by clattering across the street on his hind legs, while 20 voices shriek and growl at him as a brigand, an accursed robber, and an everlastingly doomed pig. I know your sparkling town fountain, too, my Poissy, and am glad to see it near a cattle market, gushing so freshly, under the auspices of a gallant little sublimated Frenchman wrought in metal, perched upon the top. Through all the land of France I know this unswept room at the Glory, with its peculiar smell of beans and coffee, where the butchers crowd about the stove, drinking the thinnest of wine from the smallest of tumblers, where the thickest of coffee cups mingle with the longest of loaves, and the weakest of lump sugar, where Madame at the counter easily acknowledges the homage of all entering and departing butchers, where the billiard table is covered up in the midst like a great bird cake, but The bird may sing by and by. A bell. The calf market. Polite departure of butchers. Hasty payment and departure on the part of amateur visitor. Madame reproaches Mademoiselle for too fine a susceptibility in reference to the devotion of a butcher in a bear-skin. Monsieur, the landlord of the Glory, counts a double handful of sous, without an unobliterated inscription, or an undamaged crowned head, among them. There is little noise without, abundant space, and no confusion. The open area devoted to the market is divided into 3 portions, the calf market, the cattle market, the sheep market. Calves at 8, cattle at 10, sheep at midday. All is very clean. The calf market is a raised platform of stone, some 3 or 4 feet high, open on all sides, with a lofty overspreading roof, supported on stone columns, which give it the appearance of a sort of vineyard from northern Italy. Here, on the raised pavement, lie innumerable calves, all bound hind legs and forelegs together, and all trembling violently, perhaps with cold, perhaps with fear, perhaps with pain, for this mode of tying, which seems to be an absolute superstition with the peasantry, can hardly fail to cause great suffering. Here, they lie, patiently in rows, among the straw, with their stolid faces and inexpressive eyes, superintended by men and women, boys and girls. Here they are inspected by our friends, the butchers, bargained for, and bought. Plenty of time, plenty of room, plenty of good humor. Monsieur François in the bear-skin, how do you do, my friend? You come from Paris by the train? The fresh air does you good. If you are in want of 3 or 4 fine calves this market morning, my angel, I, Madame Doche, shall be happy to deal with you. Behold these calves, Monsieur François. Great heaven, you are doubtful. Well, sir, walk round and look about you. If you find better for the money, buy them. If not, come to me. Monsieur François goes his way leisurely, and keeps a wary eye upon the stock. No other butcher jostles Monsieur François jostles no other butcher. Nobody is flustered and aggravated. Nobody is savage. In the midst of the country blue frocks and red handkerchiefs, and the butcher's coats, shaggy, furry, and hairy, of calf skin, cow skin, horse skin, and bear skin, towers a cocked hat and a blue cloak. Slavery. For our police wear great coats and glazed hats. But now the bartering is over, and the calves are sold. Ho! Grégoire, Antoine, Jean, Louis. Bring up the carts, my children. Quick, brave infants. Hola! Hi! The carts, well littered with straw, are backed up to the edge of the raised pavement, and various hot infants carry calves upon their heads, and dexterously pitch them in, while other hot infants, standing in the carts, arrange the calves, and pack them carefully in straw. Here is a promising young calf, not sold, whom Madame Doche unbinds. Pardon me, Madame Doche, but I fear this mode of tying the 4 legs of a quadruped together, though strictly a la mode, is not quite right. You observe, Madame Doche, that the cord leaves deep indentations in the skin, and that the animal is so cramped at first as not to know, or even remotely suspect that he is unbound, until you are so obliging as to kick him, in your delicate little way, and pull his tail like a bell rope. Then, he staggers to his knees, not being able to stand, and stumbles about like a drunken calf, or the horse at Franconi's, whom you may have seen, Madame Doche, who is supposed to have been mortally wounded in battle. But, what is this rubbing against me, as I apostrophize Madame Doche? It is another heated infant with a calf upon his head. Pardon, monsieur, but will you have the politeness to allow me to pass? Ah, sir, willingly. I am vexed to obstruct the way. On he staggers, calf and all, and makes no allusion whatever either to my eyes or limbs. Now, the carts are all full. More straw, my Antoine, to shake over these top rows, then, off we will clatter, rumble, jolt, and rattle, a long row of us, out of the first town gate, and out at the second town gate, and past the empty sentry box, and the little thin square bandbox of a guardhouse, where nobody seems to live, and away for Paris, by the paved road, lying, a straight line, in the long, long avenue of trees. We can neither choose our road, nor our pace, for that is all prescribed to us. The public convenience demands that our carts should get to Paris by such a route, and no other. Napoleon had leisure to find that out, while he had a little war with the world upon his hands, and woe betide us if we infringe orders. Drovers of oxen stand in the cattle market, tied to iron bars fixed into posts of granite. Other droves advance slowly down the long avenue, past the second town gate, and the first town gate, and the sentry box, and the bandbox, thawing the morning with their smoky breath as they come along. Plenty of room, plenty of time. Neither man nor beast is driven out of his wits by coaches, carts, wagons, omnibuses, gigs, chaises, phaetons, cabs, trucks, boys, whoopings, roarings, and multitudes. No tail-twisting is necessary, no iron-pronging is necessary. There are no iron prongs here. The market for cattle is held as quietly as the market for calves. In due time, off the cattle go to Paris. The drovers can no more choose their road, nor their time, nor the numbers they shall drive, than they can choose their hour for dying in the course of nature. Sheep next. The sheep pens are up here, past the branch bank of Paris established for the convenience of the butchers, and behind the two pretty fountains they are making in the market. My name is Bull, yet I think I should like to see as good twin fountains, not to say in Smithfield, but in England anywhere. Plenty of room, plenty of time. And here are sheep dogs, sensible as ever, but with a certain French air about them, not without a suspicion of dominoes, with a kind of flavor of mustache and beard, demonstrative dogs, shaggy and loose where an English dog would be tight and close, not so troubled with business calculations as our English drovers' dogs, who have always got their sheep upon their minds, and think about their work, even resting, as you may see by their faces, but, dashing, showy, rather unreliable dogs, who might worry me instead of their legitimate charges if they saw occasion, and might see it somewhat suddenly. The market for sheep passes off like the other two, and away they go, by their allotted road to Paris. My way being the railway, I make the best of it at 20 miles an hour, whirling through the now highlighted landscape, thinking that the inexperienced green buds will be wishing, before long, they had not been tempted to come out so soon, and wondering who lives in this or that chateau, all window and lattice, and what the family may have for breakfast this sharp morning. After the market comes the abattoir. What abattoir shall I visit first? Montmartre is the largest. So I will go there. The abattoirs are all within the walls of Paris, with an eye to the receipt of the octroi duty, but they stand in open places in the suburbs, removed from the press and bustle of the city. They are managed by the syndicate or guild of butchers, under the inspection of the police. Certain smaller items of the revenue derived from them are in part retained by the guild for the payment of their expenses, and in part devoted by it to charitable purposes in connection with the trade. They cost £680,000, and they return to the city of Paris an interest on that outlay, amounting to nearly 6.5%. Here, in a sufficiently dismantled space is the abattoir of Montmartre, covering nearly 9 acres of ground, surrounded by a high wall, and looking from the outside like a cavalry barrack. At the iron gates is a small functionary in a large cocked hat. Monsieur desires to see the abattoir. Most certainly. State being inconvenient in private transactions, and Monsieur being already aware of the cocked hat, the functionary puts it into a little official bureau which it almost fills, and accompanies me in the modest attire, as to his head, of ordinary life. Many of the animals from Poissy have come here. On the arrival of each drove, it was turned into yonder ample space, where each butcher who had bought, selected his own purchases. Some, we see now, in these long perspectives of stalls with a high overhanging roof of wood and open tiles rising above the walls. While they rest here, before being slaughtered, they are required to be fed and watered, and the stalls must be kept clean. A stated amount of fodder must always be ready in the loft above, and the supervision is of the strictest kind. The same regulations apply to sheep and calves, for which portions of these perspectives are strongly railed off. All the buildings are of the strongest and most solid description. After traversing these layers, through which, besides the upper provision for ventilation just mentioned, there may be a thorough current of air from opposite windows in the side walls, and from doors at either end, we traverse the broad, paved, courtyard until we come to the slaughterhouses. They are all exactly alike, and adjoin each other, to the number of 8 or 9 together, in blocks of solid building. Let us walk into the first. It is firmly built and paved with stone. It is well lighted, thoroughly aired, and lavishly provided with fresh water. It has 2 doors opposite each other, the first, the door by which I entered from the main yard, the second, which is opposite, opening on another smaller yard, where the sheep and calves are killed on benches. The pavement of that yard, I see, slopes downward to a gutter, for its being more easily cleansed. The slaughterhouse is 15 feet high, 16 feet and a half wide, and 33 feet long. It is fitted with a powerful windlass, by which one man at the handle can bring the head of an ox down to the ground to receive the blow from the pole-axe that is to fell him, with the means of raising the carcass and keeping it suspended during the after-operation of dressing, and with hooks on which carcasses can hang, when completely prepared, without touching the walls. Upon the pavement of this first stone chamber, lies an ox scarcely dead. If I except the blood draining from him, into a little stone well in a corner of the pavement, the place is free from offence as the Place de la Concorde. It is infinitely purer and cleaner, I know, my friend the functionary, than the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Ha, ha. Monsieur is pleasant, but, truly, there is reason, too, in what he says. I look into another of these slaughterhouses. Pray enter, says a gentleman in bloody boots. This is a calf I have killed this morning. Having a little time upon my hands, I have cut and punctured this lace pattern in the coats of his stomach. It is pretty enough. I did it to divert myself. It is beautiful, monsieur, the slaughterer. He tells me I have the gentility to say so. I look into rows of slaughterhouses. In many, retail dealers, who have come here for the purpose, are making bargains for meat. There is killing enough, certainly, to satiate an unused eye, and there are steaming carcasses enough, to suggest the expediency of a fowl and salad for dinner, but, everywhere, there is an orderly, clean, well-systematized routine of work in progress, horrible work at the best, if you please, but, so much the greater reason why it should be made the best of. I don't know, I think I have observed, my name is Bull, that a Parisian of the lowest order is particularly delicate, or that his nature is remarkable for an infinitesimal infusion of ferocity, but I do know, my potent, grave, and common counseling seniors, that he is forced, when at this work, to submit himself to a thoroughly good system, and to make an Englishman very heartily ashamed of you. Here, within the walls of the same abattoir, in other roomy and commodious buildings, are a place for converting the fat into tallow and packing it for market, a place for cleansing and scalding calves' heads and sheep's feet, a place for preparing tripe, stables and coach houses for the butchers, innumerable conveniences, aiding in the diminution of offensiveness to its lowest possible point, and the raising of cleanliness and supervision to their highest. Hence, all the meat that goes out of the gate is sent away in clean-covered carts. And if every trade connected with the slaughtering of animals were obliged by law to be carried on in the same place, I doubt, my friend, now reinstated in the cocked hat, whose civility these 2 francs imperfectly acknowledge, but appear munificently to repay, whether there could be better regulations than those which are carried out at the abattoir of Montmartre. Adieu, my friend, for I am away to the other side of Paris, to the abattoir of Grenelle. And there I find exactly the same thing on a smaller scale, with the addition of a magnificent artesian well, and a different sort of conductor, in the person of a neat little woman with neat little eyes, and a neat little voice, who picks her neat little way among the bullocks in a very neat little pair of shoes and stockings. Such is the monument of French folly which a foreigneering people have erected, in a national hatred and antipathy for common counselling wisdom. That wisdom, assembled in the city of London, having distinctly refused, after a debate of 3 days long, and by a majority of nearly 7 to 1, to associate itself with any metropolitan cattle market unless it be held in the midst of the city, it follows that we shall lose the inestimable advantages of common counselling protection, and be thrown, for a market, on our own wretched resources. In all human probability we shall thus come, at last, to erect a monument of folly very like this French monument. If that be done, the consequences are obvious. The leather trade will be ruined, by the introduction of American timber, to be manufactured into shoes for the fallen English. The Lord Mayor will be required, by the popular voice, to live entirely on frogs, and both these changes will, how, is not at present quite clear, but certainly somehow or other, fall on that unhappy landed interest which is always being killed, yet is always found to be alive, and kicking.